You're listening to Short History Shorts audio, where history speaks louder than images. The Catiline Conspiracy is one of the most notorious episodes of the late Roman Republic, a drama of political ambition, social unrest, secret meetings and betrayal, set against the backdrop of a state already fraying under the weight of corruption and factionalism. It is the story of Lucius Sergius Catilina, better known as Catiline, a man of patrician birth but turbulent fortune, who sought to seize power not through slow ascent, but through a sudden decisive blow to the existing order. It is also the story of Marcus Tullius Cicero, the consul whose oratory and political manoeuvring would foil the plot, though at a cost to his own career and reputation in the years to come. To understand why Catiline's conspiracy was possible at all, one must look at the conditions of Rome in the 60s BC. The Republic was strained. The social order had been warped by a century of wars, the rise of powerful generals, and the growing influence of vast estates controlled by the elite. Small farmers had been displaced, swelling the urban poor in Rome itself. Political corruption was rampant, with elections often decided by lavish bribes rather than policy. Wealth was concentrated in the hands of a few senatorial families, and ambitious men without fortune often found themselves trapped, too noble to fade into obscurity, too indebted to rise by conventional means. Catiline fit this mould perfectly. Born around 108 BC into an old but somewhat faded patrician family, he had a respectable start in public life, serving under Sulla during the bloody proscriptions of the 80s BC. Those years, marked by political killings and confiscations, left their mark on him. He saw the brutal efficiency with which power could be seized and consolidated. As praetor and governor of Africa in the early 60s BC, he sought wealth to match his ambitions, but left behind accusations of extortion. Barred from running for the consulship in 65 BC due to legal challenges, he spent the next years gathering a network of discontented senators, veterans, and adventurers. Catiline's political platform in his consulship campaigns was radical for its time. He promised massive debt cancellations, redistribution of land, and reforms that threatened the entrenched interests of the Senate's conservative bloc. These promises resonated with the indebted nobility, veterans from Sulla's campaigns who felt neglected, and the desperate urban poor. He also drew in young aristocrats ruined by extravagance and gambling, men who, like him, needed a sudden change in fortune. The elections for 63 BC were decisive. Catiline ran for consul again, and his main rival was Marcus Tullius Cicero, a new man from Arpinum, without noble ancestry but renowned for his eloquence and legal skill. Cicero represented the optimate's cautious reformist stance, change, but without overturning the Republic's foundations. Cicero won, with Gaius Antonius Hybrida as his co-consul, leaving Catiline defeated and embittered. For Catiline, this was more than a political setback, it was a turning point. In the months that followed, rumours began to circulate in Rome about a conspiracy forming among Catiline's supporters. According to later accounts, including Cicero's own, the plan involved assassinating Cicero and other leading senators, seizing control of the city and joining forces with an armed uprising in Etruria under the leadership of Gaius Manlius, a former Sullan centurion. The conspirators met in secret, binding themselves to loyalty with oaths and even, it was alleged, with ritualized blood drinking, though some historians see this as later propaganda to paint them as monsters. Cicero, ever vigilant and well-connected, began gathering intelligence through informants. By late October 63 BC, he had enough to act. On November 8th, the Senate met in the temple of Jupiter Stator, and Cicero delivered the first of his famous Catilinarian orations. Quo usque tandem abutere, Catilina, patientia nostra? How long, Catiline, will you abuse our patience? The words thundered through the chamber as Cicero laid out the accusations. Catiline had plotted to burn the city, to murder senators, to ally with armed rebels. Rather than arrest him immediately, Cicero's strategy was to isolate him politically. Catiline, realizing the tide had turned, left Rome that night under the guise of heading to exile, but instead made for Manlius's camp in Etruria, effectively declaring open rebellion. Inside Rome, however, the conspiracy was not yet finished. Several key followers remained, working to spark riots and coordinate with the rebel army. Cicero moved quickly, tightening security, placing the city under the Senatus Consultum Ultimum, the Senate's emergency decree. The breakthrough came when envoys from the Allobroges, a Gallic tribe seeking redress for grievances, were approached by conspirators and offered a role in the uprising. The envoys, suspicious, reported everything to Cicero. With their help, letters from the conspirators to the rebels were intercepted, providing tangible proof. On December 3rd, Cicero convened the Senate and dramatically unveiled the evidence. Several conspirators, including prominent senators like Publius Cornelius Lentulus Sura, were arrested. This brought the Senate to a fateful decision: what to do with them. In a heated debate, some argued for imprisonment until trial. Others, led by Cato the Younger, urged immediate execution to prevent any chance of rescue. Cicero sided with the latter, and on December 5th, the prisoners were strangled in the Tullianum, the state prison. Meanwhile, Catiline's rebel army in Etruria found itself cut off and confronted by forces loyal to the Senate. In early January 62 BC, at the Battle of Pistoria, Catiline fought with desperate courage, reportedly in the front ranks, and fell surrounded by his men, all refusing to flee. His body was found far ahead of his troops, a symbol of reckless bravery and doomed ambition. The aftermath of the conspiracy was mixed for Cicero. In the immediate term, he was celebrated as the saviour of the Republic, hailed as Pater Patriae, father of the fatherland. His speeches against Catiline were copied and read as masterpieces of political oratory. Yet within a few years, political winds shifted. Enemies like Publius Clodius Pulcher accused him of unlawfully executing Roman citizens without trial. In 58 BC, Cicero was forced into exile, only to return later when the political climate changed again. As for Catiline, his name became synonymous with treachery and subversion, but some later writers, like Sallust in his Bellum Catilinae, offered a more complex portrait, acknowledging his charisma, his skill as a soldier, and the genuine appeal he held for Rome's dispossessed. The conspiracy thus stands as more than just an isolated plot. It was a symptom of the Republic's deeper instability, a warning that the traditional political order could no longer contain the ambitions of men who felt locked out of its rewards. The social and economic pressures that fed Catiline's following would continue to build, erupting later in the popularis movements of figures like Julius Caesar, and ultimately in the collapse of the Republic itself. The Catiline conspiracy, therefore, is not merely the tale of a failed coup. It is a mirror of the Republic's decline, showing how personal ambition, systemic inequality and political fear could combine to push Rome ever closer to the brink.